Welcome to the Bend Don't Break podcast. We are powered by The Source, Bend's locally owned media company and weekly newspaper. This podcast is our eddy in the rushing waters of local journalism. We are glad that you're taking some of your time to listen to us chat with the people who shape our local community. Support us through our member program at bensource.com.
Thank you to our presenting sponsor, RE/MAX Key Properties, a family-owned full-service real estate brokerage specializing in residential, luxury, commercial, new construction, and ranch and land properties. Their new state-of-the-art facility at 42 Greenwood Avenue is a modern, collaborative space and the new home of the Bend Don't Break podcast recording studio.
Thanks for joining. I am Aaron Switzer, publisher of The Source and producer of this fine podcast. Today, we are joined by Brian Rankin, the City of Bend's senior strategist and a key voice behind how Bend is planning for the future. He's been at the center of everything from expanding the city's urban growth boundary to tackling the tough questions around housing and infrastructure. Brian's job is all about making sure Bend grows in a smart, thoughtful way. Brian, thanks for coming in today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I remember this podcast, actually, the origin of it was when I moderated the City Club Forum. I had such a good time that I came back and I told Megan, I was like, we got to get Brian on. We'll just goof the whole time.
It's in your system now. You're hooked. You're hooked.
It was. I was like,
you did a great job. That was fun. That was fun.
And I did think it was one of the more compelling city clubs. I mean, I thought that the panel we had, I forget the gentleman from the county, and we had a planner from Visit Bend.
Yep.
And it was fascinating. And but one of the things that stands out is I thought, if I ever get a more grown-up job, I want strategist in my title. To have that as part of your, like, I feel like I'm a strategist, but I'm just not recognized for it.
It just means they don't know what to do with you.
Right.
That's what it means. They're like, what are you? We're not sure. Okay, strategist.
Put the strategist at the end of the hall, and we'll consult with him sometimes. So, well, Brian, how long have you lived in Bend?
It's going on 30 years.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure it out. I'm terrible with dates, first of all. So I actually looked at a resume. When did I move here? Because it was in that 94, 95 time period.
Very similar to when I came.
Yeah, I swear I remember you. Did you used to play pickup ultimate frisbee?
Yeah.
I remember you from that. I was like, that's my first, like, oh yeah. So we both go back.
Yeah. And where were you from Bend? How did you select this fine place? How'd you get here?
It's funny. Ultimately, high school buddies.
Yeah.
Yeah, they moved up here to be snowboarders, and there were a bunch of folks. I'm from a small town, Sonora, California is where I grew up.
Yeah.
It's a very small community, very rural. And so I had a bunch of high school buddies move up here, and we played in a high school band. And so talk about not being a strategist. It was like, I'm going to go make music with my buddies after college.
At this place where the venues hold 20.
Right, exactly. Yeah, back in the day, you know, like, you're going to really make it. No, but I just fell in love with it.
Yeah.
When I was visiting them.
And was your background in planning?
Yeah.
And was there a job here when you got here? How'd you end up at the city?
Well, you remember that time. The job market was really thin.
Yeah.
I went to school at UC Davis. I graduated from UC Davis in planning and environmental policy. So it was kind of a combined major.
And music.
And terrible music, by the way. I'm not a musician.
Right.
Not a musician. I just like to make noise. Just post-college, had been in California around about, and I love where I grew up, but it didn't have the opportunity, the small town thing. And so Bend had that small town vibe that I loved, in connection with nature, and it felt very comfortable. And my buddies were here.
Yeah.
So why not?
Yeah.
Let's give it a shot.
So how does that get you into the city? When did you start working for them?
Well, I started working. I mean, my first job was I was a busboy at the West Side Bakery. You probably remember that. And
with the little choo-choo train.
Yeah, with the choo-choo train. And then one day I got tired of that and called up David Evans and Associates. And there was a planning function there. They're an architecture, engineering, surveying firm. And so I got on with them. Worked for them for 5 years. So that really got me into it. And I really thank Karen Swirsky, who kind of mentored me and brought me into it, the applied aspects of planning.
Yeah.
And then from there, big recession, and then worked on my own for a while, and then went to Sisters.
Okay.
And so, I worked in Sisters as a planner, and then worked up to planning director, and then Bend hired me in about 2007.
I can't imagine back then there was much planning in Sisters.
You know what? It was during the boom.
Oh, okay.
It was the boom.
Yeah.
Remember the boom time?
Yeah.
The big buildup of Bend. It was happening to Bend and all of us. And so it was quite explosive. Sisters had a faster growth rate back in the day than Bend.
Yeah.
So it was booming there. And a lot of the things you see in Sisters were created back in that time, like
Yeah.
Five Pines, and, places like that.
Yeah.
It was really busy. And then Bend brought me on right before, or kind of right when they were doing their UGB expansion, because I had done that out in Sisters.
Oh, okay. Okay. And when you first came on, what was where were you in the hierarchy of strategists?
Well, they brought me in as a senior planner.
Okay.
And just focusing on long range planning.
Okay.
And I did a little bit of everything in Sisters, comprehensive planning, UGB expansions, and then literally down to, this is what I love about Sisters. I recommend any planner go work out there, because you're like, there's a stray dog.
Right.
Go get the stray dog and put it in the kennel, right? Signed ordinance, enforcement, building permit. You do everything in these small towns, and it was so valuable, and the people were so diverse and incredible. So yeah. And then just pure long range from there on out.
Great group of folks and Sisters during that time, those early, Sisters days, where I still have friends there, and it was a cool little community to pop out of and go up there. I mean, it's changed so much now, but
characters. There are characters all around.
A lot of characters.
And that reminds me of my hometown, because the hometown had, you had the cowboys, you had the cowboys and the hippies and the the jocks and in this small town environment, and everybody just learns to get along and figure it out together, which I adore. And Sisters was a lot like that, and Bend has those characteristics too.
One thing that's stuck with me from when we were talking was about Memorial Day, when we were talking about how that's a benchmark for growth and our busiest day, right? The busiest day. And you guys can take a look at that day and kind of see the future a little bit. Yeah. Is that's the case?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people are like, well, what is, I swear my mom and dad don't even understand what I do, honestly, after decades of talking with them. They're like, okay, whatever. It sounds like
whatever. Keep strategizing.
You look at maps, I'm like, oh yeah, but you're really trying to look out ahead. So long range planning in Oregon is looking out ahead. Yeah. Right. And there are different ways you do that, right? So you're working with projections, right? A lot of modeling and projections forward about what is this community going to look like, population growth, employment growth, traffic growth as well. Right. And so I think that point I had raised with you was, some of the modeling we've done about the summer peak here, right? And we've all experienced that as you drive around. You're like, oh my gosh, you've got people with boats and all the things. And that really busy day in the summer now is like the traffic volumes that we'll experience on the regular, on the daily basis.
Terrifying, right?
In 15, 20 years.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
I liked it because it was a wake-up call. I was like, because you're always in that traffic and you're going, how soon before this goes away? And then after that, I was like, this is going to become permanent. But I realize you're planning and you're trying to come up with a way to make that not as such a burden. But
you're right. I think that's, Bend is at this, we have been, and we're approaching that point of, a small town to a medium to a large size town to a small city, right? We're getting up to that population threshold, and things really start to change and evolve over that period of time. So it's not just status quo for the next 20 years. And you can see changes now, for example, that are shaping the community that will make changes in the transportation system so that hopefully it's not the same kind of experience in 20 or worse.
Well, it's something like when we do best of at the paper, and it's way too big an issue for the amount of staff and what we've gotten, so everybody loses their mind, and I have to keep telling them like it will go away. Like there will be a post couple weeks when we work like normal people again. Imagine it's somewhat of the same thing. But I mean, I was over in Corvallis this past weekend with some friends, and there was several people around that I didn't know, but of course they knew Bend, and that's all they talk about. All they talk about is when'd you get there, and what have you experienced, and And man, I went through there. It's not like when I went there a couple of years ago. It's just, that thing. But I mean, it did make me realize how, as soon as I say it now, it's coming up. I mean, growth is kind of our DNA. I mean, it's been happening for so long and over such a wide period that it's kind of who we are as Bendites, right?
It is. I remember doing some research at the Historical Society and the museum over there, and dug up this old article from the 20s talking about housing crisis and the rapid pace of growth and how it's unsustainable and how, where the building is, right? It's right by the source, that Reed School, right?
Right.
And how it was built at the edge of town.
Yeah, you see the pictures when you look at the source building. We are just outside town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're right. It is kind of baked into that boom bust cycle, that growth cycle. It is part of our, I think it is part of our DNA. And I had a friend and coworker and sisters. He's like, Brian, why would they stop coming here? When you compare Bend, even though we are growing and you look, it's still an amazing, incredible community. It's very desirable.
Until they put a curtain over the mountains, I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. People, I think one of the most common refrains that I hear is, make it stop. Can you make it stop?
Right.
And then it's kind of an interesting follow-up. It's like, well, when did you move here? Right. Well, I moved here 2 years ago, but make it stop now.
Yeah. Right.
And it's kind of built into us, I think, as human beings. Like we love something, we are attracted to it, and then it starts changing. And it creates fear, it creates resentment, it creates all these feelings. But the truth of the matter is, we live in this country, and people have that right to mobility and to move where they want if they can afford it. Yeah. Right. Which is now one of our major struggles, right? Because people from outside the area can. It's crazy to say this is affordable to a lot of the people who are moving here.
Anybody who's lived in Santa Cruz or any of these other booming California towns know what the cost of a house is. I mean, we're still not at parity. And even though the housing keeps going up and up, I'm always like, friends are moving up here. And I'm like, they cashed out. They still can afford to get here.
Yeah, it's frightening. Yeah. And I think it's like a systemic challenge we've had, and then what we're going to continue to have. Because, as you know, you can't say no, right? The city doesn't control the private land market, right? We don't control, and people say, thank goodness, we don't control what somebody decides to list their house for or what they're charging for rent, for example. And people are free to buy and sell their properties as they generally see fit. So we don't control that at the city. Right. We control infrastructure. We can have incentives. We can plan for growth. We can focus on land supplies and things like that. But I think it's because it is so desirable. And as we grow, I think a lot of people find that, you're growing a lot, but it's still a great place.
Right.
Not the place you move to. And believe me, there are a lot of opinions here. No. There are a lot of people clearly finding Bend desirable, but it's baked in, and we're going to have to keep struggling to figure this out.
Yeah, I think when you speak to people who've been here as long as we've been here, you do need to give yourself a little head check because, like I still draw comparisons in housing prices to when I was first here. When I bought my first home, I'm not paying that for that piece of property.
It's so true. I'm not paying $75,000 for that house.
That's insane.
Right. Yeah.
It's a 3-bedroom.
Yeah.
But you do want to try, or I try as much as I can to look around, look at the mountains, remember some of the, reasons that we moved here. And I mean, they still haven't started bulldozing the Forest Service yet, or the forest yet. So it's so incredible. And, as long as people keep taking their Instagram moment, it fills, and leave everything else to the rest of us, I'm happy.
This is good. I'm glad. I do think there's a lot of real pain as well. I mean, that's because we can talk about this Bend and the Instagram Bend, but then there's the other Bend, which is that people are genuinely struggling to afford their housing and food as we speak, right? So this is it's really baked in to it's such a strange dichotomy, I think, that we have this beautiful place that we all love, and oh my gosh, look at all the things, and at the same time, lots of us are struggling to make ends meet or to move up in that ladder, right? I want to purchase a house. I want to move on. I want to try something different. I want to get a better place to live. So it's a little bit of both.
I mean, it's at the core of your. At the core of what you do, and I imagine more so than in most places where you're constrained by a UGB. The state limits you. Within that tight little circle, you've got to find all the affordable housing that everybody needs to drive down the prices, but still balance, livability.
Right.
And I mean, that's got to be an incredible challenge. And I love Oregon's. I love a lot of Oregon. I love the way Oregon constrains it. And there's farm. I believe there would no longer be a Redmond and a Bend if it weren't for the UGBs and the infrastructure they put. We would be contiguous at this point. Right. But it's a challenge, and it's you can see it in the housing prices.
Yeah. Yeah, and so people, well, what are people doing about it? How do you
fix
deal
it?
With that? Fix
right.
it.
Yeah.
And so that gets into the long range planning kind of components. It's not just long range planning, by the way. I mean, there are so many different ways that the city is trying to address creating a more diverse housing stock.
Yeah.
Most of Old Bend, and when you moved here, for example, it was single unit detached housing, and so a big focus has been on make it easier and let the city get out of the way to provide a wider variety of housing types.
Yeah.
Cottages, duplexes, triplexes, townhomes.
Right.
Go down the list. ADUs, things like that, right?
ADUs.
So get out of the way regulatorily, and the state is forcing this as well. But it's get out of the way to create more diverse housing stock, more housing options there, incentives, right? And so these are things that are kind of in my realm, but not quite. There are also other folks at the city are focusing purely on this. Yeah. Build up our affordable housing program as well to fund more deed restricted affordable housing. And then when you kind of get to that, like, the incentive side, there are a whole bunch of folks who are like, let's try site specific TIF. Let's do urban renewal districts to try to create funding sources to build these things that we're hoping to plan for. And then there's the long range planning side, which is, okay, what is our supply of housing if you look now compared to our need for 20 years? Right. And so that's where we start to say, well, we can change the entitlement inside, right, to allow mixed use development that you now see taking root in Bend. And you can also expand the urban growth boundary. You have to go through a whole lot of work to get there to provide more land in order to provide that housing. Right. But you have to do a ton of, it's a ton of work at the community level. Which I think that's ultimately our savior, really, are the folks that are here. Yeah, it's technical, it's legal, it's social. I think it's a fascinating process.
Yeah, I mean, talk a little bit about Jack Straw, because it's, I know that you. One other thing was my takeaway from City Club is, everybody is right in the moment. They're right in the moment of what is happening with regard to construction and. I have candidates for city council and county, and they are all going to solve the housing crisis this term, and that's what they're selling to people as they go. And I'm like, not this term, not this 4-year term. And I was struck by the fact that, as a strategist in long-term planning, and are there people who do short-term planning? Because it doesn't seem like that's really kind of a thing, because you're long-term. You're working on things, you're working on problems that the rest of us aren't even aware of yet.
Well, there's a whole team of planners that are in our current planning division. Yeah. There are more of them than, say, us as long-range planners. We're a very small group that are focused on more of the permitting and entitlement side, right? Oh, okay. And so it's making sure that, there's a cascade, first of all. You have your policy objectives, right? And then you have development codes and standards and things that you build to in order to reach those policy objectives, okay? So there are a whole bunch of people that are working on that permitting side to make sure that what goes up and what people see and experience in the city meets our requirements and standards. So that in the short term, right, to match that policy objective. You don't just get to the long-term objective. It takes all this work from all kinds of people to have that happen. So it's
maybe I just trust the short-termers too much, and I don't trust the long-termers. I'm like, they'll get it right. That's already been laid down. What are the long-term people doing?
Yeah, and we all work together in this too, because you have these feedback loops of learning about what works, what doesn't. Hey, we need that. Let's get out of the way here. Let's incentivize this. So it's a really the thing about Bend. It's such a, with the demand here. that what seems like long range in a lot of communities is more like medium term. For me, it's like 5 to 10 years, right?
Right.
A lot of the things that you mentioned, like Jack Straw, Timber Yards, that area over there, that, in 2016, if you remember, that used to be able to do industrial.
Yeah.
That's what you could do there.
Right.
And a group of Bendites came together and said, you know what? We need to be more efficient with our land. That's a great place to do vertical mixed-use housing. And these are folks of different political stripes, with very different backgrounds, and that usually didn't agree, but they agreed about that.
Yeah.
So the city adopts this, and just less than 10 years later, you have a building type in Bend that we haven't seen before as a result of that.
Right.
Right. So it takes the long range can become more of the medium range in Bend because of demand.
I found the whole thing fascinating because, of course, there was lots of community discussion about it at every level, from, changing the zoning to the height to the deal that was struck to what the implications were for the future with regard to those deals. And I mean, just watching all of that play out to where it is now, where it's looking pretty good, and we just saw, I just saw, maybe they've been out forever, but the plans for what that's going to look like between the box factory in there, pretty awesome. And I just think given it wasn't smooth. It wasn't smooth to get here,
Yeah. I mean, these are complex projects.
Right.
I think that's, a day in the life of city staff that are working on these things. And when we work together, we tend to work, so you have engineers, folks from water, folks from transportation, long-range planners, current planners. You have a whole legal, our legal team, a whole bevy of people, right? They're coming together to be like, okay, we have a complex problem, because the easy stuff is kind of done, right? So it's very tricky to pull all that off and work with private developers to make sure it meets our standards. But you're right. It's that's probably that is our biggest, tallest building in Bend now when it's completed. But I think a lot of people are like, I don't want that building. I don't like it. It's not Bend. I hear that a lot. It's not Bend.
For sure.
And then I guess my question would be, well, if you have around 300 units there, right, would you prefer to add 100 units of expansion to the urban growth boundary? Because that's the, like you get to, 75, or, so you're either going up or out. And Bend has a hybrid strategy. It's like, we're going to go up in certain places, not everywhere.
Right.
And we're going to go out in certain places. So it's not one or the other. It's a little bit of both.
Yeah, I think if people I think if they do a little strategizing, look a little long range, you'll see that there's, with the way things are growing, you're certainly going to. I mean, anybody who's played SimCity knows eventually you got to go up. You just can't afford to keep running it out. And there's plenty of places you can point to. Like I always point to Boise because I spent a couple of years there, and what a nightmare. I mean, just it goes on forever and ever and ever, and they have no restrictions, and you can just go up and stop. We don't need to go colonize all those little communities out there and subdivisions. So if you're listening, Boise, I'm not a fan. So
well, Boise proper.
That's cool. But you know what you got to go through to get there? Yeah, from the border.
Yeah. But I think part of it, like at least, and I'm trying to reflect decisions of the past and thinking of the past. And we'll have an opportunity to update this thinking when we update our new kind of 20-year plan, which is coming up here in the next couple of years. But the wisdom I thought at the time to reflect that conversation was like, look, housing is one of those things where you want to give people choices.
Yeah.
Not everybody wants to live in a mixed-use building downtown. They have boats, they have kids, they have whatever. Right. They don't want to do it, right? And by the same token, not everybody wants to live, say, in a new subdivision at the outskirts of town, right? So part of this is like providing that choice to people.
That's a good point.
Over time, and also it changes affordability levels because not everybody can afford a single unit detached house, but you might be able to afford a variety of different housing types. So
I think the other thing I find fascinating about your job is like with Jack Straw, like you put these things in motion in 2016 and you're not getting the feedback until 2023, 2024, when people in the community are noticing work you already did, work that's been put in place, and there's no pulling it back. I mean, you kind of got it all on the line when you roll it in 2016, thinking, yeah, I hope everything aligns when they break ground at that point. That's got to be, I wouldn't say frustrating, but it's a workplace hazard.
Well,
or challenge. It's exciting.
It is. I feel for people like that because we do like in 2014 through 16, and we did a ton of public engagement, right? All the public committee meetings, not everybody can go to that. We did online surveys. We tried to do outreach. Let's put it this way. It was pretty well advertised what was going on. Right. However, we're all busy.
Yeah.
Right. We're all busy, and people are leading their lives as they well should. Right. Yeah. And so you're right. After a certain number of years, they're like, "What the heck?" Right. And a lot of people don't have the and why would they? Right. Have the recognition. No, this is planned, and this is part of a district that will look like this over time. Right. And a whole bunch of community members came together and said, "Yeah, we're going to do it here." And the reason why they're doing it here is so we didn't do it in existing neighborhoods. Yeah. Right. Right. And so it's that strategy again. There is more. How would I say it? You're right. You can't. It's hard to keep people up to date as you speak, but also we can do a better job as a city in pulling people into that discussion to avoid those surprises. So I take that to heart as well.
Yeah. Brian, we're actually at the end of our
we can keep
time.
going.
I could go.
We can go. We're going to do a series. We're doing a series from here on out. That's it.
Strategy, Volume 2.
But I'm going to be like, what's it like to be an editor owner? You know, we're going to have a job swap.
We'll just flip it.
That's what we're going to do.
I'm down. So, Brian, anything you want to say to folks before we transition out?
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I think if anything, get involved. I think the city is trying to evolve and do a better job, right, as an organization of getting involved and getting people involved.
Yeah.
Surveys, events, showing up to parks, joining with other agencies, and so we're trying to make ourselves more and more available. My goal in the next couple of years as we tackle our next growth plan for the next 20 years is to do a better job of that and provide more opportunities for people to provide feedback. And that feedback matters. In my opinion, I've observed it 100%.
You can see it over time.
And so, get involved. We're trying to make it easier and faster so you don't have to sit in a boring meeting room, for 3 hours and sweat in City Hall,
And go up for your 2-minute presentation.
Exactly. So I think that's it, really. Yeah. And, and we need all the voices, too. It's not just one group of folks. It's really as many people, and all your opinions really do matter in this town.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I was talking to our producer Megan Burton on the way over here.
She's fantastic.
Yeah, she's great. And talking about how, and of course this is the challenge of journalism, is getting people to care, getting how compelling can the journalism be to keep people riveted, or city presentations, and there just has to be this fundamental care in a person to stay involved in the community with regard to, what's coming in and to follow the news and to be a part of that. And I do feel it's very easy to get distracted with national politics and things that are happening on a level you can't really affect. And you let all the other stuff go to hell in the meantime. And so, this is me piggybacking on your thing to say people should care about on the local level. And, it's why they get shocked by things like jackstraw, because all of a sudden they're like, what? This is happening here?
Where'd that come from?
I was blogging about the Supreme Court.
Well, thank you for, we have a great local media outlet, and we are blessed to have multiple media outlets, you and The Source being one of them. So thank you. It's great to have more voices.
Well, Brian, thanks for being here.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate your time.
This has been the Bend Don't Break podcast. If you like what you heard, go to bensource.com, become a member, support us so we can bring Brian back for volume 2 of the strategy sessions. Thank you for listening. You've been listening to the Bend Don't Break podcast, powered by The Source Weekly. To read, hear, and see more of what we do, go to bensource.com.